Chazal tell us that the world is split into three 2,000-year periods of history. The first 2,000 years are called Tohu Vavohu. The second 2,000 years are the 2,000 years of Torah. And the last 2,000 years are the years of Moshav Matityahu. When did the 2,000 years of Torah begin? The Cha'ora Adam Harishon learned Torah. He had 6 mitzvahs that he had to keep. Noach for sure learned Torah. He knew which animals were kosher and which ones were not. Yet the 2,000 years of Torah did not start until Hanefesh Asher Asu Bechoron, when Avram Avinu started to go out and be makarev the people of his generation and bring them closer to the Ribono Shel Olam. That's when the 2,000 years of Torah began. Torah is not the property of individuals, but Torah is the property of Klal Yisrael, and more so even parts of the Torah for the entire world. You know, we pride ourselves that we received the Torah with 613 mitzvahs, but there is no one in the world who could ever fulfill 613 mitzvahs, not because it's too difficult, because it's impossible. Because if you're a Kohen, you have mitzvahs that no Yisrael or Levi has. So Yisrael and Leviim do not have Tarig mitzvahs. So what do you tell me? A Kohen has Tarig mitzvahs. Not true. Because there are mitzvahs that a Kohen doesn't have. No Kohen will ever fulfill the mitzvah Pidyon Haben as a father. He's exempt from it. There are certain mitzvahs that are only for men. No woman could ever fulfill those mitzvahs. Yet there are certain mitzvahs that are only for women. And no man could ever fulfill those mitzvahs. At least in my lifetime, I'm hoping no man will ever bring the korban after childbirth. That is not a man's mitzvah. So unless you are a Kohen, Levi, Yisrael, man and woman wrapped up into one, which today may be possible, but under normal circumstances was not, you can't have Tarig mitzvahs. So how do we understand the fact that we accepted a Torah with Tarig mitzvahs? Because we didn't accept the Torah as individuals, but we accepted it Ke'ish Echad B'Leiv Echad, one conglomerate called Klal Yisrael. And parts of that conglomerate are men, and part are women, and part are Kohanim, and part are Leviim, and part are Yisraelim, and together we have Tarig mitzvahs. So until Avram Avinu went out to bring the world closer to Torah, the 2,000 years of Torah didn't start. And therefore Chazal tell us, the Zohar says, that Yisrael is the Rashi Tevos of Yeshishim Ribui Osios La Torah. There are 600,000 letters to the Torah. Simple meaning that there are 600,000 souls, root souls of Klal Yisrael. There may be more than 600,000 Jews, but we're all part of a cluster of neshamos, and there are 600,000 clusters. And just like there are 600,000 souls, there are 600,000 letters in the Torah, and everybody has his letter. Very beautiful, except there's one problem. There aren't 600,000 letters in the Torah. So you'll tell me, okay, it's a gematria, so, plus or minus 1 or 2 doesn't make a difference. How many letters are there in the Torah? 304,588. That means that about half is missing to make 600,000. So I know about 11 answers to that question. The Pnei Yeshua speaks about it in Kiddushin on Lamed Aleph. But I think there's no question. The question would only be if it said, Yesh Shishim Ribui Osios Ba Torah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. There aren't. Then you need answers. But it doesn't say that. If it would say that, it wouldn't spell Yisrael, it would spell Yisroab. In order to spell Yisrael, it has to be Yesh Shishim Ribui Osios La Torah, which means in addition to the 304,000 letters in the written Torah, you have to add another 600,000 letters to make the Torah complete. Those are the neshamos of Klal Yisrael. And that echoes another Zohar. Yisrael v'oraisa v'kudsha b'richu chadhu. The Torah and the Jewish people and the Ribono Shel Olam are all one. And therefore, if you don't add the neshamos of Klal Yisrael to the Torah, it's not a Torah. And just like in the written Torah, where there are 304,000 letters, every letter is unique. And every letter is important, because if the Torah is missing one letter, it's not a Torah. So too in the additional 600,000 letters that you have to add to make the Torah complete. The 600,000 neshamos, if one neshama is missing, then the Torah is not complete. So in order for the Torah to be complete, it has to encompass all of Klal Yisrael. And if anybody's missing and doesn't have his part in Torah, and he doesn't exercise his part in Torah, then the Torah is not complete. And therefore, the 2,000 years of Torah started only when Avram Avinu went to make the Torah public, to be able to see to it that everyone has their share and their part in the Torah. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah says, "Halo made al manas lalamed, maspikin biyado lilmod lalamed." Person who learns Torah with the intention of teaching it, he's given the power to learn and to teach. Halo made al manas lasos, but if somebody learns Torah with the intention of doing it, then he's given the ability lilmod lalamed lishmor v'lasos. First of all, lasos does not mean to observe the Torah, because that would imply that the first person just wants to teach other people but not observe it for himself. A person like that who learns and doesn't observe what he's learning is better he shouldn't have been created, the Gemara says. So that's not what it means. The Avnei Nezer explains there are 4 levels of Shmiras HaTorah. There's Lilmod, you learn for yourself. There's Lamed, you teach others. There's Lishmor, you observe the Torah for yourself. And then there's La'asos, to make other people observe the Torah, to be makarev others. It goes without saying, the Mishnah didn't mention even Lishmor. Of course you have to observe the Torah. If you learn the Torah and don't observe what you're learning, better you shouldn't have learned. That goes without saying. So the first person is lo made al manas lalamed, meaning and also to observe. He's going to learn, observe, and teach others. But he's not going to be able to make those other people keep what he teaches them. He just can guarantee they'll learn what he's teaching them. The second person is not only lo made al manas lalamed, but lo made al manas la'asos, to make other people keep the Torah. One step further. So he gets everything. Lilmod lalamed lishmor v'la'asos. Says the Yavitz in his Perish Lechem Shamayim, what about a person who just learns and observes? What does he get? Halo made al manas lilmod, and obviously to observe. Why doesn't the Mishnah mention that level? Why does it right away start with the level of halo made al manas lalamed, where you learn to observe and to teach others? What about learning for the sake of learning? Not teaching anybody. Says the Yavitz, the Gemara says in Psachim, halo made shalo al manas lalamed, a person who learns Torah and does not have the intention of teaching it to others is Dvar Hashem Boza. He is insulting the Torah. And at the end of that pasuk is, he koresh, ti koresh. And therefore he gets no siyata d'shmaya. A person who learns without the intention of giving over what he learned to others gets absolutely nothing, because there is no madrega like that. Someone who learns just for the sake of his own learning is Dvar Hashem Boza, says Rabbi Yafetz. That doesn't mean that a person has to be a Rebbe or a Malamed or a Rosh Yeshiva. It means that when you learn Torah, you have to understand you have a responsibility to give to others what you learned. It could be to a chavrusa, it could be to a chabura, it could be to anyone, it could be to your family. But if you feel that it's your own personal property, and it's not something that you're learning in order to give over to others, then Dvar Hashem Boza, then the Torah is not important to you. Because if it's important, why wouldn't you want to share it with others? The Marsha in Sanhedrin, the Gemara says that the purpose of this world, Adam la'amal yulad, a person was created to toil. And the Gemara says the ikar toil of a person is in Torah. Says the Marsha, Adam la'amal yulad, la'amal is notrikom, lilmod al manas lalamed. That's la'amal. The amal, the toil that a person has to have in this world is learning with the intention of sharing it with others, of giving it over to others. There is no level of learning for your own sake alone. The Medrash HaGadol says on the pasuk, "V'yohavta re'acha kamocha ad she'eh kimocha b'deos." It's not only a halacha that you should want for your neighbor what you have for yourself, in money, in hatzlacha, in success in this world, in happiness in this world. But v'yohavta re'acha kamocha should be in ruchniistic things too. You should want that your neighbor should have the same deos, midos, chochmas haTorah, shmiras hamitzvahs. If I have it, then I have a mitzvah to love someone else and want them to have it too. And I think maybe that's what Rabbi Akiva meant when he said, "V'yohavta re'acha kamocha ze klal gadol b'Torah." I think the emphasis is b'Torah. People think that v'yohavta re'acha kamocha is a klal gadol b'gashmias. Whatever I have materially and physically, I should want for someone else. Came along Rabbi Akiva and said, no. V'yohavta re'acha kamocha ze klal gadol b'Torah. It applies to Torah just as much as to your physical and material needs. But if you have something in Torah, you should want that for your neighbor also. And therefore the Klosenberger Rebbe explains the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Im lamadata Torah harbe, al tachzik tova li'atzmecha, ki lekach no tzarta. The simple meaning of the Mishnah is, if you learned a lot of Torah, don't take credit for it, because that's what you were created to do. Says the Klosenberger Rebbe, Im lamadata Torah harbe, if you learned a lot of Torah, al tachzik tova la'atzmecha, ein tova leTorah. Don't hold that good for yourself, selfishly. Ki lekach no tzarta. You were created to give that over to others, to share it with others, not to just hold it for yourself. So if you learned a lot of Torah, you should realize you have a responsibility to share it and to give it over to others also. The Rambam says, based on the Gemara in Yevamis, in the end of Hilchis Chanukah, Lo nitna haTorah ela lahavi shalom ba'olam. The Torah was given to bring shalom to the world. Shalom means shleimus, perfection, harmony. Perfection in this world is only reached in a team effort. Only God is perfect. Everything else needs many, many different things and sometimes opposite things to work together to bring perfection. Oh, says Shalom b'mromav, the Rebbe Shlomo makes Shalom between water and fire and makes Shamayim. When things work harmoniously together to create a perfection. The Torah was to create perfection. How does it create perfection? By teaching each person what they can contribute, what their portion in Torah is, Torah and mitzvahs. And when everybody works together, and everybody exercises their special portion in Torah, then there's shalom and shleimus in the world. And therefore, Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam. That's the purpose of a Talmud Chacham. To be marbe that shalom. To teach others and guide others how to bring out their part in Torah so everybody can work together. And with that, you get a tremendous bracha. Torah says, it says it in the negative, but we'll start with the positive because that's how they started at Har Grizim and Har Evel. Baruch asher yokim es divrei haTorah hazos la'asos osa. One of the pshatim, the Yerushalmi says, of Baruch asher yokim means somebody who has the ability to make other people keep the Torah. And he does it, and he fulfills his responsibility. He has the ability to influence others. And he fulfills that responsibility. Then he gets a special bracha. Baruch asher yokim es divrei haTorah hazos la'asos. Like we said before, la'asos does not mean to observe the Torah. It means to make other people observe the Torah. Baruch asher yokim. And if a person has the ability and he doesn't use it, and the Medrash says that if you have the ability to influence one person, and you influence that one person, you get the bracha. And if you don't influence that one person, you get a klala. Or asher lo yokim es divrei haTorah hazos. If you have the ability to influence 10 people, and you do it, you get a bracha. If you don't do it, you get that klala. If you have the ability to influence your entire city, and you do it, you get a bracha. You don't do it, you get a klala. The entire country, the entire world, it depends what your potential is, what capabilities you have. But if you have the capability, you're responsible to use it and to spread the Torah, because that spreads perfection to the world where everybody claims their portion in the Torah. And that is Hashavas Aveda, because everybody has a portion in Torah. And if they're estranged from it and they lost it and they don't know about it, then if there's a mitzvah to return their lost animal or their lost object, there's surely a mitzvah to return their lost heritage. So Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam, and by doing that, you get a special bracha, Baruch Asher Yokim, as Divrei HaTorah Hazos. How great is the reward for doing that? So the Alter from Kelm, Simcha Zissel, says we can learn from a mesis. A mesis is somebody who attempts to pull somebody off the derech. A mesis is somebody who comes and entices you to serve idolatry, or according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, to take you away from any mitzvah, to be merachik you, distance you from mitzvahs. The halacha of a mesis is lo sachmol alav, even though there's a special mitzvah v'yahavta re'acha kamocha, doesn't apply to him. Him you should hate. And not only that, but you should try to be able to destroy him, to kill him. That's a mesis, the worst of the worst. We know that midah tova meruba midridas puranios chamesh meos pamim. Good, the antithesis of that evil, is greater than that evil 500 times for the good. So if a person who attempts, even if he's not successful, he attempts to pull you away from Torah, look at how terrible he is. Somebody who attempts, even if you're not successful, but somebody who attempts to bring someone else closer to Torah, what kind of reward is destined for that kind of person? We can learn from how terrible a mesis is. 500 times greater is how great a person who makes the attempt to bring somebody else to Torah, even if he's not successful. Just like the mesis is judged for making the attempt, even if he's not successful. And don't think for a minute that influencing other people and letting them access their portion in Torah is their benefit. It's your benefit. It's your benefit. It says by Avram Avinu, Hanefesh asher asu b'charon. Avram Avinu made a nefesh, made a soul in Charon. The Chori made a lot of souls. Avram Avinu was mekarev a lot of people. Why didn't it say hanefashos asher asu b'charon? So the simple answer is that when it comes to spiritual things, it's all one. There's a unity. There's an achdus. By Yaakov Avinu it says, nefesh, kol ha-nefesh ha-yored le-Mitzrayim shivim nefesh. Not nefashos, it's all one. But the Chorah by Avram Avinu wasn't Jews. He was mekarev goyim. By goyim we don't say that. By Esav it says nafshos beiso. There it's the plural. So why by Avram Avinu was it nefesh? So I think for two reasons. One is, Avram Avinu realized that if he is mekarev these people to the Rabbanu Shalom, he's not only perfecting them, but he's perfecting himself. The nefesh asher also refers to Avram Avinu's own nefesh. Because since we are all interrelated, and the shleimus of the world depends on everybody doing their part, Yidden, Goyim, everybody. The ideal will be when the non-Jewish world will work together with us in serving the Rabbanu Shalom, them with their 7 mitzvahs, us with our 613 mitzvahs. When everybody works together, the world will reach a certain amount of perfection. And then everyone will benefit by being part of that perfection. And until the world reaches perfection and everybody does their part, no one is perfect. That's why the halacha of arevus. If I made kiddush, I can't decide I like making kiddush, I'll make it again. I like the sound, I like the wine. It's a bracha levatala. But if my friend who doesn't know how to make Kiddush comes into the house and he hasn't made Kiddush again, I can make Kiddush again for him. Why? Because part of me hasn't been Yotzei Kiddush if he hasn't been Yotzei Kiddush, because he's part of me. So when I make Kiddush for him, I'm not only perfecting him, I'm perfecting that part of me that's connected to him. So Hanefesh Asher Asu Becharam. Avraham Avinu was not only perfecting the nefashos of those people he brought closer to the Ribono Shel Olam, but he was perfecting his own nefesh. And the second lesson, I think, is sometimes people feel it's only worthwhile if you're makarev hundreds of people. But individuals, what's the benefit? It's not worth the effort. If you don't realize that being mekarev one nefesh, just like hamatzel nefesh achas v'Yisrael, a person who saves one life physically, is like he saved an entire universe. Then how much more so if someone saved someone spiritually? It's like saving an entire universe. And therefore it's not only important if there's numbers, but every individual is important. And because Avraham Avinu went after the individuals and he understood how important it was to bring closer even individuals to the Ribono Shel Olam. Ha-nefesh, not nefashos. Because he valued every nefesh, he was successful with millions. Had he only been looking to bring closer millions, he would be successful with no one. And therefore, it's not only perfecting others when you influence them, you're perfecting yourself. And every single one is infinitely and universally important. It could be, that's another way of learning what was wrong with Noach. Noach, it says, Tamim Haya B'dorosav. He considered himself perfect in his generations. Avraham Avinu would never consider himself perfect in his generation. If there are people estranged from the Ribono Shel Olam, then something's wrong with me. Then something's missing in me. Because we're all connected one to the other. And if they're not perfect, then I'm not perfect either. Because my perfection depends on them. But Noach was Tamim Haya B'dorosav. He considered himself perfect. I'm okay, I'm a tzaddik. It's their problem. All those Rishoyim in the Dor HaMabul who eventually were destroyed, Noach looked at their problem. It's not my problem. I'm a Tamim. A Tamim Haya B'dorosav. If there's so many people there who are imperfect, then you're not perfect either. How can you consider yourself a Tamim if there's all those people out there that are interrelated with you that are not a Tamim? Conversely also, just as much as influencing and perfecting other people is your perfection, you are perfecting yourself. You're affecting yourself, not only affecting them. The opposite is also true. It says, Moshe Zocha v'zika es harabim. Moshe Rabbeinu could not have influenced and affected other people if he didn't first affect himself and influence himself. The Vilna Gaon says the best way of influencing other people is compared to a cup. You want to take a cup and fill other cups. So if you pour from the first cup into other cups, eventually the first cup's going to become empty. You're not going to be able to pour anymore. There's a better way of doing it. If you fill the first cup and let it overflow into the other cups, then the first cup remains full and it constantly fills up all those other empty cups. This applies not only to English cups, it applies to Yiddish cups also. If your cup is empty, if your head is empty, then you're not going to be able to influence anybody. And the more you fill your cup, you fill your head with Torah, with Yiras Shamayim, with Midos Tovos, then you can overflow into other people. So perfecting yourself and sitting and learning is not a contradiction to going out and influencing other people, but they have to go together. First you have to have a Moshe Zocha. First you have to fill your head with Torah and Yiras Shamayim, and the bigger you are, the more you'll be able to overflow and influence other people. And the smaller you are, the less impact you'll have. If you go out to influence others as a firecracker, you make a lot of noise, but won't accomplish too much. But if you become an atomic bomb in a positive way, you'll make a very much bigger impact than a firecracker. So it's not only that influencing and perfecting others is self-perfection, but self-perfection also is the first stage of being able to influence and have an impact on other people. And therefore there's an inyan of lilmod al manas lamed. First you have to learn. You have to have intention that what you learn you share with others. You have to be able to become a tzaddik in mitzvahs. But what you are working on your mitzvahs and your yiras shamayim has the intention to influence others and share it with others also. And the more you learn, and the more you are clear about what you are doing, the more you can impact and influence other people. The word lemor has two meanings. Normally it means to tell over to others. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. The Rebbeinu Shalom told Moshe to tell Klal Yisrael lemor. But sometimes it can't mean that. Vayidaber Moshe lefnei Hashem lemor. He didn't tell the Rebbeinu Shalom to tell somebody else. So there Chazal say lemor means brirus, clarity. Said it clearly. In fact, some say whenever it says Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, it hints to Torah Shebal Peh. That the Rebbeinu Shalom told Moshe Rabbeinu this what it says, but he clarified it. He explained it to him, that he knew it clearly what the intention was. That's lemor. There's no contradiction between the two meanings. Because if you don't know something clearly, you can't possibly give it over to someone else. You can't teach someone else if you don't know the material. And if you don't believe in the material and you're not committed to it, and you're not on the level where it's mamish part of you, then it's very hard to sell something that you don't believe in. You want to be a good salesman, you have to believe in the product. And the more you work on your emunah and your yiras shamayim and your understanding of Torah, then the more you can give over to other people. And that's why Torah says, V'shinantom levanecha, shiyu divrei Torah chidudim al picha. The Torah should be clear to you. You shouldn't stutter. The Chorah, we're not talking about learning. We're talking about teaching. V'shinantom levanecha. Chazal should have said, the Torah you should make the Torah to your child clear that he doesn't stutter. Why v'shinantom to Chazal darshan? It should be clear to you. Because if it's not clear to you and you're stuttering, you're not going to be able to give over to your child. So the v'shinantom levanecha, if you wanted to get levanecha, then it'd be shinunim al picha. Then you know what you're talking about. So the more you learn, and the more you're mamik in learning, and the more you work on your midos, and your yiras shamayim, and your emunah, that is not a contradiction to giving over to others. It's a preparation for giving over to others. Because the greater you are, and the more you know, and the more you are clear about what you know and what you believe, the more you can give it over to other people. And that is godless. What does it mean to be a big person? How many blot Gemara do you have to be to learn to be a Gedolah? Today you don't have to learn too much altogether to be a Gedolah. Everybody's a Gedolah. A Rav Hagol, everybody's a Rav Hagol. From the time they're bar mitzvah. You're already over bar mitzvah, you're a Rav Hagodol Hagol. But how does the Torah look at it? How do you know if you're a Gedolah? The Torah says about Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayigdal Hayelet, Moshe Rabbeinu grew, and then it says Vayigdal Moshe. So the Ramban says the first time was physically. He matured physically. The second time was he became an Adam Gadol. What made him an Adam Gadol? The Torah says, Vayetze elecha vayar b'sivlosa. He went out and he saw the tzaras and he was able to commiserate with Klal Yisrael, nosei ba'olim chaveiro. He was able to empathize with them. That's a Gadol. Why is that called a Gadol? Reb Shimon, in his Hakdama to Shara Yosha, says the following. We have a responsibility to worry about ourselves. Self-concern is a legitimate Torah mandate. Chayecha kodmin, you come first. Your life comes first. If you need money and somebody else needs money, you come first. Efes lo yeh b'cho evyon. If you're losing something and somebody else, even your Rebbe, your father is losing something, you save yours first. After you save yours, then there's a shaila, who comes next? Your father, your Rebbe, whatever. But you come first. Self-concern is a legitimate Torah mandate. Yet you can't only be concerned about yourself. We have to be responsible to be concerned about other people too. Says Reb Shimon, how do you resolve that conflict between self-concern and concern for others? He said very simply, somebody who considers himself from his head to his toes, that's me, and everybody else out there is them, then there's a big conflict of self-concern and concern for others. But some people are bigger than that, and they realize their spouse is part of them. Ishto kegufo, baal ki ishto. When they're concerned about their spouse, they're not concerned about someone else. That's self-concern, except their self-concern is two bodies. Some people realize their children, bro kara davua, their children, extension of them. When they're concerned about their children, they're not concerned about somebody else. That's self-concern. It's an extension of me, except it includes many bodies. Some people understand that their relatives, their relatives, extended family are part of them. That's also self-concern. Some people realize their city, their country, all of Klal Yisrael is part of them. So everything is self-concern. Now it's just a matter of priorities. Which part of me comes first? But it's not me and them. And it makes a very big difference. Because the Chiddushei HaRim asks a very, very strong question. Yaakov Avinu was looking for a pillow. There were 12 stones, seemingly, that each one could have been that pillow. In other words, it was big enough to put Yaakov's head on. The stones were fighting. Olai yoniach tzadik es rosho. I want to be the stone that Yaakov puts his head on. So what did the Rebbeinu Shalom do? He fused all the stones together. How did that solve the problem? Now you have one gigantic stone, 12 times the size of Yaakov's head. He's going to only be able to put his head on 1/12 of that stone. Why isn't it still fighting? Which part of the stone? The answer is simple. As long as they were separate stones, it made a difference if the tzaddik's head is on this stone or that stone. But once they're all together, it makes no difference if it's this part of me or that part of me. So too, if a person understands that everybody is part of them, and he feels that perfecting them is perfecting himself, and perfecting himself is perfecting them, then there's no conflict anymore. And that, says Reb Shimon, is the meaning of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Im ein ani li mili. If I don't worry about myself, who's going to worry about me? I have to worry about myself. But kisha'ani li atzmi, when my ani is just little me, then mo ani, that's not my ani. My ani has to encompass everyone. And I think there's a hint in the word ani to that. The ani is the aleph. On one side is the individual. The yud on the other side is the tzibur. There's everybody else out there. The yud is the minyan, is the tzibur. How do you connect the individual and the tzibur to make that your ani? That's what you are. You need a nun. The nun, Rashi says by Moshe Rabbeinu, Nosan eina v'libo lios netzer aleim. He put his eyes and his heart to feel what they were feeling. He empathized with them with his heart and with his eyes. You need chachma and you need regesh. You need emotion and you need wisdom to understand what other people need. If you only have a heart and emotionally, right, you reach out to others but you don't have a brain, then you may help people in a way that's harmful to them. You may help feed a person's addictions and think you're doing them a favor. See, I need a little seichel too. But if you only have seichel and you have no heart, then you may make studies about helping poverty, but you're never going to do anything about it. So you need a heart and you need chachma. When it comes to chachma, there's 50 gates of wisdom. And when it comes to tahara, there's 50 gates of tahara. That's the nun. The nun is 50 gates of chachma and 50 gates of tahara. If you have that, then you can combine the aleph of the individual and the yud of the tzibur and make that your ani. That's who you are. And the reward, if you are makarev others and you influence others, whether they be people estranged, far from Yiddishkeit, or people close but need to be strengthened, the reward is eternal. There's a Tosfos in Rosh Hashanah. Tosfos says that a person is judged immediately after he dies, and then he's judged again before Yom Adin HaGadol, before the great judgment day, before Tchias HaMesim. So everybody asks, what do you need two judgments for? Once a person died, he's not doing anything more. There's no more mitzvahs, no more averos. So just take out his tick and see what it was. Why do you have to have a new judgment? Says Rav Aaron Kotler, because yes, a person can't do mitzvahs and averos after he dies, but he gets the dividends on what he did. If a person, for instance, before he died, he paid the tuition of somebody, his neighbor's child, to go to yeshiva, they were going to throw him out of the day school, and he paid his tuition. And then he died. So he comes to Shamayim, and they give him 10 points for being a nice guy and paying the tuition. Well, that boy now learns Torah every single day. This guy gets dividends every day for the Torah, that child that he enabled to learn Torah, because if he would be in public school, he wouldn't be learning Torah. The boy grows up, marries a beautiful Beis Yaakov girl, right, and bring up a beautiful Torah family, which he wouldn't have done had he gone to public school. So this man is getting dividends in Olam Haba for that family and for all the Torah that the family learns. And now one of the children becomes a Rosh Yeshiva and has hundreds of Talmidim. He gets schar for that too. And it goes on ad lenetzach nitzachim. So by the time of Tchias HaMesim, that one little mitzvah that he got 10 points for paying the tuition is now millions of points. The opposite is also true. If you marachik people from Torah, then you get the dividends, the negative dividends, l'netzach nitzachim. So it's kedai to impact people positively and not negatively. Just want to end with a medrash. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak, limedcha Torah derech eretz. Yitzchak said the Torah taught us derech eretz. Shekshiyasa other mitzvah, if you do a mitzvah, have the oso so belev sameach. Do it with a happy heart. She'ilu have a yoda Ruvain. If Ruvain would have known the Torah was going to write that he tried to save Yosef, he would have picked him up on his shoulders and run home with him. And if Aaron would have known that the Torah was going to write that he saw Moshe Rabbeinu the first time as the Redeemer and he was happy, he would have come with a parade. And if Boaz would have known that the Megillah is going to record that he gave Ruth some parched wheat, he would have given her a banquet. Obviously, it doesn't mean that if these people knew they were going to get good PR, they would have done it differently. It's not what it means. Secondly, what's the derech eretz over here? Derech eretz is bein adam lechaveru. Here it's doing a mitzvah, belev sameach. And thirdly, Aaron, it says, he was v'samach belibo. What could he have done more? He was sameach belibo. Torah's meyed, v'samach belibo. So what's by Aaron, he would have done it more, belev sameach, if he brought a parade? I think it means the following. When a person does a mitzvah for himself, so he does it perfunctorily, does it with kavanah, whatever, he does it, finished. But if you do a mitzvah to teach someone else how to do the mitzvah, you wave esrog and lulav, so you wave it. Makayim it with all the kavanahs, whatever. But if I want to teach my child how to wave esrog and lulav, I don't just do it stop. I do it in a more demonstrative way. I show him, see, this is an esrog, this is a lulav. Now we're holding it. We shake it like this and shake it like that. Because I'm teaching him, I want to make an impression on him. The Rambam says in Pirush HaMishnayos, derech eretz is a word that has many meanings. It can mean midos tovos, it can mean commerce, it can mean husband-wife relationships. All of those are called derech eretz. What's the tzav hashaveh? What's the thread that unites them all? Whatever creates derech eretz, a functioning society, is called derech eretz. If you don't have people, you can't have a functioning society. So husband-wife relationship is called derech eretz. If people don't know how to interact with each other, there can't be a society. If there's no commerce and economy, there can't be a society. All of that is called derech eretz. Rabbi Yitzchak said the Torah taught us derech eretz. When you do a mitzvah, don't think that you're doing it only for yourself. Boaz, Aaron, Ruvain thought they're doing a mitzvah, private thing, and they did it the way they're supposed to do it. Had they known the Torah was going to record it, and they wouldn't just have been doing mitzvahs to themselves, but now they're teachers. Every time you read Parshas Vayeshev, you see what Ruvain did, you learn from him. Every time you read Parshas Shmos, you learn from Aaron. Every time you read Megillas Ruth, you learn from Boaz. They're not doing a mitzvah, private mitzvah. It's a mitzvah that teaches others. Then they would have done it b'leiv sameach. Not they would have had a leiv sameach. They would have done it in a way that others could see the leiv sameach. And that would have made an impression on them. And the Medrash ends, v'hayom, it's not over. Eliyahu Melech HaMashiach quotes from this Kisvei HaKodesh being written in Shamayim. You don't know what the Rebbeinu Shalom's recording, but you do. Don't ever think you're doing it only for yourself. But it could be someday it's going to be publicized. And it could be, even if you don't know it's being publicized now. Someone sees you. Someone hears. You're a different kind of person. You make a different impression. So when you do the mitzvah, don't only have a Lev Sameach. Do it in a way that people see the Lev Sameach. Because you're always a mashpia. You're always a mekarev in everything you do. And who knows how many psukim, how many parshios each one here has. And you won't be able to say, if I would have known, I would have done it differently. Because I'll be there, and I'm going to say, you did know. I told you the medrash. Maybe Boaz, Aaron, and Reuven didn't know. But you do know. So take it to heart. And realize there's a tremendous chiyuv. And also a tremendous benefit. Not only to worry about yourselves, but to worry about Klal Yisrael, to worry about the world. If you build yourself up, you're helping the world too. And by helping the world, you're building yourself up also. And if you do it, the reward is eternal. And if you do it properly, then every single thing you do, you have in mind, how is it going to affect other people? That's derech eretz. And with that derech eretz, you are zoche lenetzach nitzachim.